Aleichem. Again, we are going on an order of different relevant topics in halacha that seem to be not known, a little bit controversial, maybe more
Niche.
practical. And I have this is Rabbi Wilhelm from Online Smicha. I have with me two youngsters who are young in age but knowledgeable, Uriel and Eliezer Altschul. We are going to do a partnership here. We're going to be discussing today honey and see what issues may there be. What the practical part is, how is honey made? And once we find out how is honey made, what halachic issues may there be with honey? So, like for example, would raw honey need a hechsher? Would processed honey need a hechsher? And let's get to the bottom of it. A very unique thing we find about honey, that honey is something that's produced from a non-kosher species. A bee is one of those things that a yid is not allowed to eat. So how is it non-kosher animals or any other non-kosher thing that produces something, the extension of it is also prohibited? What's unique about the honey? So let me just give a short introduction.
Right.
In honey, in the word, the translation of honey in Hebrew is devash. When the Torah uses the word dvash, it doesn't necessarily only mean the type of honey that we know of, that we buy in the store, which is usually bees' honey. The Torah, for example, says a pasuk, "Kol se'er v'chol dvash lo saktiru." On the mizbeach, there's not going to be any se'er, bitter, sour, and that's for a different time to discuss. And it says v'chol dvash, and no honey, no honey, loy saktiru, shouldn't be brought on the mizbeach. Over there, it doesn't necessarily mean bees' honey. Over there, actually means any sweets cannot be brought, especially from fruits, cannot be brought on the mizbeach. So the term dvash is not necessarily only bees' honey. It became, maybe we'll soon hear from these young gentlemen, maybe it's easier, or that's the most honey is made that way. Usually, however, when we say dvash, we usually refer to dvash dvarim, the dvash of the honey made from bees. What's unique? What is unique about the honey made from bees, as mentioned before, is a bee is non-kosher, and yet honey is not only kosher, we actually insist to use it certain times. We use it to symbolize having a sweet year. To make a simon on Rosh Hashanah, we eat apple dipped in honey.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful reasons is given specifically to stress that we are similar to the honey, just like honey comes from something non-kosher, and yet it's very, very sweet and it's kosher. So we turn to the Eibishter on Rosh Hashanah and we say, we might have had a little rocky past. Our background is not that good, but we commit to be sweet and good. So, but yet, halachically, we have to discuss why it is really that it is allowed. So before we get to the halachic view of this, I'm going to turn to you youngsters, to tell me how is what is the process of the honey making the bees making the honey. So we'll see if this is an issue that we have to prohibit, or maybe it's different than milk from a non-kosher animal.
Mm-hmm. Take it away with the palm. Okay, so the way that the bees honey is made is that a bee goes to a flower that's filled with very sweet nectar, and then it takes that nectar, puts it in what is known as a honey stomach. And as it's flying back to the hive to deposit the nectar, all of its saliva and other proteins inside the stomach, in the honey stomach, starts breaking down the nectar to make it more like the honey. And once it arrives at the hive, that bee spits it out and gives the nectar to another bee that's working inside the hive. Then that bee takes the honey and then into their stomach and starts spitting it out and then eating it back several times till it's partially digested. And once it's done, and once they do that, the bees put it inside a honeycomb to store it for later use.
Later digestion.
For later use. And
So what
inside
is
of the
the input of the bees into this pollen? I mean, just pollen couldn't produce honey by itself. Obviously, it's the bee. I want to know what part of the bee is invested in the honey making.
the spit and
The stomach.
and the stomach.
It's
What do
practically.
you mean by the stomach? You
Because
realize where I'm getting.
yeah.
Halacha says that the reason why the honey is permitted, even though it goes through the bee, is because it's the poller. It's just like he's the agent to put it together, but there's nothing of him in it. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, they do change, and what they mainly change is sort of the sugar, or the way the sugar is structured, and the amount of water it is, because nectar is a very liquidy type of, very liquidy, and the honey that we have is not really a liquid. It's very congealed. So what they mainly take out is liquid, and also change it to make it taste better, and things like that. And the way that they regurgitate is kind of similar to how animals chew their cud.
Meaning,
Well, when they give it to the other bees, they eat it, then spit it out, and eat it again, and then spit it out several times. And so it's never until it's somewhat digested, not completely.
so this production, what you hear here, is only the bee could make this honey from the pollen. Did you read up if
No,
there's any
there
other?
are some wasps that can also
Wasps,
do it.
other insects, some other insects. But in theory,
So
humans also can mimic the production of bee making. But
who could? Now the
humans,
mimicking, I don't care about because
yeah.
mimicking, it's imitation. I'm asking you if it go now that you mentioned the wasp or other insects, they could also make honey. The
Mm-hmm.
wasp is not kosher, the insects are not kosher, and the bees are not kosher. So this halachic permission is not because in all three of them it works the same way. They're not investing something. It's not a piece of them in the honey, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a piece.
I
Just
suppose,
like
yeah.
it's very similar. Could you compare it to milk or milk from an animal or eggs from a chicken? The reason why you're allowed to eat eggs from a chicken is
Well,
because it's not part of the chicken.
yeah.
The reason why you're allowed to have the milk from an animal, it's not considered a part of the animal.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it's similar to that?
Yes, because
Yeah.
like what we've mentioned about the civet coffee, they don't change it completely. It never becomes really a part of the bee. For the most part, just store it and just slightly digest it.
In other words, it was from the nectar of the flower. It went through the bee. The bee merely processed it, and then it became this honey.
Okay, so the bee, the Abishter has given the bee the unique talent, and now you know there's wasps, and you said some other creatures that could take nectar and turn it into honey.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we said that halacha says because it's not, they don't have their own flesh invested in the honey. That's the reason it's kosher. That's the reason you could eat it. Okay, so when you go to the store now and buy a jar of honey, uh, did somebody just take the honey out of the honeycombs and that's it, or
Well,
there's a process afterwards? In
There,
other
there,
words,
well,
where
there
I'm
is a
getting where I'm getting at,
yeah.
if it's raw honey just straight out of the comb, whatever it is, then why would you need supervision?
Well,
The
okay.
question is, are there anything mixed in there, maybe today's days, to keep it last? I don't know. And is there a process of boiling, cooking? I don't know. Is anything done to it to make it what we buy in the store?
Well,
yes.
if I can.
Okay.
Well, there's the definite difference between normal honey and raw honey. Most honey, the most honey that you'll buy in like a beer bottle and all of that, that does get cooked. Well, the process is that the honey, they take the honey from the bees. Very simply, they take the comb and then they drain the honey. It goes through a drain to make sure there's no bees in the honey itself. You don't want to have insects in your honey. So it goes through a
And that
drain.
that's almost impossible. That you're
Well,
not going to
yeah.
have it.
Well,
Which
yeah.
which leads which could I stop you for a minute?
No
Which
problem.
leads to another question.
Hmm.
Which leads to the question, even though, and this is also discussed in Shulchan Aruch, even though we just explained why the honey is permitted because it's not the bee, but it's almost impossible to have just honey straight out of the comb and not either dead full bees in there or at least bee legs all over the place.
Hmm.
And that's for sure non-kosher.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that problem? How do we deal with the problem that even if it's honey is not the bee, but there is going to
will be
be
some bee
real
in it.
bees in there. There
Yeah.
is going to be bee legs. So I must tell you that I think the process will be somehow down the line they're going to heat it up or do some kind of
Yes,
process it,
that's just
and
normal.
the
Okay.
halacha will discuss how could you heat it up when there's still possible bees in there and bee legs, and that will ruin the honey. But I'll let you. You just said that it looks like the draining, the sifting is
Yeah.
maybe before the heating up. Is that right?
Yes, it does get
Okay.
drained
So
before
and
heated
I'll
up.
tell you what the halacha says.
Well,
So what? First you said, yeah.
they first drain it, and raw honey. If you were to buy like a jar of raw honey, that's it. They just drain it, and there's your raw honey. Normal honey, like a
And
honey
there's
mill.
no heating up.
There's
No,
no
hold on.
heating
No
up.
heating up. No.
That's raw honey. But then there's other honey which is normal honey that you will find like in a beer bottle that you'll squeeze out like that. That is already cooked up.
Pasteurized.
Yeah.
And why do they do that?
To break down the sugar to get a better liquefied taste, things like that.
And also to prevent crystallization.
Yeah, for the sake of taste and texture.
Do you know if they add anything when you pick up a bottle of honey? Is there going to be ingredients anything but honey?
Sometimes yes.
Sometimes yes. Though they do have to list it. Usually they would sometimes add some sugar
or syrup.
Or syrup, yes.
Okay. This is a red flag.
Yes.
I'm heading to why would you need kashrus supervision? The second you add some things, you have to make sure and supervise that what's added is not a problem. I don't know what they're putting in there, but the word add is a red flag.
Yes.
So the raw honey you're telling me,
no,
it wasn't even cooked. Is that correct?
Even cooked, yeah.
It wasn't. Yes. It wasn't even heated up.
So
I was wanting to. What is that spinner? What is the process of the spinning? How do they take the honey out of the honeycomb? Do you know?
Ooh, that's.
I believe they like sort of scrape it off a little because some of it can leak out, and I don't really know precisely how they do it
with that part, but they do take it from the comb, and they use some sort of tools to get rid of. They take the comb itself as well to separate the bees. And
my question is, like those tools. Mm-hmm. If it's only tools that they're using for honey, if there is a kosher honey that's being used now, could they use those same tools? Is there any? Are those tools only used for honey, or are those tools? And if it's only used for honey, and you're saying raw honey can never have a problem, so let's share tools with my Goyish neighbor who has beehives, right? But if there's other processes done, with the tools, maybe that could be another issue why you might need a hechsher for honey.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, if I understand your question, the tools are only used for honey.
Yeah, sure.
These tools, they're only used for extracting honey from the beehive. These are.
And at this point, the tools, even if they're not only used for honey, It's a tool that's used for cold items.
Yes,
Yeah.
they don't cook.
Even if they added,
They then place it into
okay,
something which heats it up.
so now you added that they cooked the honey for whatever reason. There's benefits to the honey, and not to crystallize or whatever it is they cook it. Here it turns into another red flag.
Mm-hmm.
What's the red flag?
Well,
What are they cooking it in?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, it's kind of like a big pot.
Yeah.
Very much like that.
If they're cooking it in, okay, so if they're cooking it in a pot, who says the pot was only used for kosher stuff?
Well, that's another thing that has to be regulated, I suppose.
Okay, so is there and then you know anything about the transporting of the honey? Do you know anything of the bottling of the honey? Is that any issue that could come up in your mind? I'm just getting to to summarize, when you think about honey, how many halachic issues could have there been, and how could we avoid that? So I have right now, number one, that it comes from a non-kosher creature.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I answer that. I answer this. It doesn't come from within. It's just an agent.
Yeah.
The next question we had is, when you boil it up, there's two problems of boiling it up. You're boiling it up. There might be bee legs there. There might be real bees there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't strain it, made sure there's nothing left, the bees and the bee legs, you're cooking something non-kosher with kosher. The third question is, what utensil are you using while you're heating it up? If it's a non-kosher keli, maybe that keli was used for pork early in the morning. And the last question was, if there's any added ingredients, we have to make sure that the added ingredients are kosher.
Yes.
Is there any other issue that you could see of?
Not that I can think of. Bottling is just a simple bottling process.
Okay, so let me go through point by point. Point number one, we answered already.
Yes.
This is not a din of yotzei min hatame. Why is it not a issue of yotzei min hatame? Because it doesn't have any of its own invested there.
Mm-hmm.
The second question: how could you boil it up? How could you boil it up when there is bee legs there or bees there? So there is actually two answers. Answer number one is the honey is going to be so much more than the bees. Even if there are bee legs there and there are bees there, it's automatic going to be buttled. It's going to be nullified by the fact that it's so much, it's insignificant, the amount of bees or beeswax compared to the honey. So it's buttled, it's outnumbered, it's diluted. So the $1 million question comes up: diluting an isser is only after the fact, meaning if a problem happened, you could rely on that it was diluted. To intentionally make honey knowing that there's bee legs there, I'm sure back then it was harder to get rid of all the bees. Today's days, with our machinery, I'm sure we could drain it much better. But if back then, where they didn't do a great job, and you know there must be some crushed bee legs there, crushed bees, how could you intentionally do that knowing that there is bees here? So, and this goes into the question of ein mevatlin isser lechatchila. In Ta'aruvah Siman Kufay, it says intentionally to be mevatel isser, you can't do it. So the answer which is given in Siman Pei Dalid, the answer which is given is, there is a big difference between intentionally taking a piece of chazer and putting it into your cholent and saying, I'm not worried about it because the cholent is 60 times the size.
Okay.
Why did you put that chazer in? It's because you want another pound of meat, you want the chazer, and you're just ignoring the fact that it's chazer because it's diluted by 60 times the amount. That you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
In this case, when you're boiling up the honey with the bees' legs, you don't want the bees' legs. It's not you're looking to be mevatel the isser. You don't want the isser. So in a case where isser becomes bottle, automatic, despite the fact that it's happening, despite the fact that you know it. But however, you have no interest in it. There is no problem of a mevatel isur lechatchila. That's the answer to that problem. Another answer which is given, you forgot. We're talking about bees.
Yeah.
We're talking about insects. We're talking about bugs, these type of creatures. An average person doesn't enjoy that taste, doesn't eat it. So because it doesn't eat it, I don't even need the fact that it's batel b'shishim. Right?
Right.
You're not allowed to eat the insect itself.
But
You're not allowed. So for that, we say the insect itself is not, even if the taste is bad, you can't eat the insect. By the time it's the honey, it's completely diluted. It's a different form.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. That's what the Rishonim say. So I covered the second problem now.
Yes.
That
we have
even
to
though
cook
there's
the honey.
bee legs and there's bees, you can let it pass. The third problem, how about the keli? Well, all I know that you're heating it up. They're heating it up in a keli that there's chazer taste there. So this is actually a shocker. In Shulchan Aruch, in two places, it says in Hilchos Noising Tam Leb Gam, and later on in Machali Yakum, again it's mentioned. The honey is very unique. Honey clashes with meat. And even the Shach jumps on this and says, I've seen many dishes that honey glazed chicken, honey glazed, it does taste good. So there's a discussion about that. But my point is that we believe that honey and meat, if there's old meat flavor there, that's non-kosher, and that's creating a problem into the honey, don't worry about it, because that taste that's coming out is anyways clashes with the taste of honey. So it is pogum. It's a bad taste. It's a blemish taste. And we only prohibit good tasting isser. If it's not even a good taste, then we don't have to worry about it.
That's fascinating.
So now, there's a lot of discussion about that, right? Obviously, that's something that has to be elaborated. You'll see it in Dinei Noisen Tam Leb Gam. So we covered the next point. The last point you mentioned is that they add more ingredients.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you start adding more ingredients, then there has to be supervision to make sure that those items are kosher.
Yes.
All right. I want to finish off this topic by telling you a very interesting fact about honey. The interesting fact about honey, we know there's different halachas in the Torah and the halacha about mashkin, liquids. For example, liquids make food roy lekabel tuma. If a liquid fell on food, now if an impure person touches it, it becomes tamei. If it never got wet, it's not roy lekabel tuma. We know, for example, it's also brought in Shulchan Aruch that you have to wash and any item that's dunked and vegetables or something that's dunked in liquid. We know this from Karpas on the night of the Seder. You wash, you're not supposed to eat it without washing first. So there's a discussion, what qualifies as a liquid? So there are 7 things that are considered liquid. Believe it or not, honey, even though it's dripping, it's not so much like water liquid. Honey has a din of a mashka, of a liquid concerning these halachas. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the honey?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. We covered it all, of my knowledge.
So God should bless us. God should bless us all with the honey sweet year.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.